The brutal truth: until you respect yourself, nobody else will. Behind your exhausting smile is a corpse. You aren't unconditionally kind. You are a terrified hostage to a dark childhood pact. Watch to the very end to learn how to slaughter the polite ghost inside you, trigger a brutal emotional war, and forge an impenetrable fortress of self-respect. The narrative from the swamp, the agony of concession, and a ruthless awakening. Look closely into the mirror. Behind that exhausting, ever-present smile you plaster on your face every single morning, there is a corpse. You breathe, you walk, you nod along with everyone, yet you are utterly invisible. Have you ever sat in a room full of roaring laughter, surrounded by people who call themselves your friends, and suddenly realize with a sickening twist in your stomach that you do not matter to them at all? You wonder why they cut you off mid-sentence without a second thought. You wonder why they casually dump their burdens on your shoulders, burdens they would never dare hand to anyone else. You blame the cruelty of the world. You curse their apathy and cry yourself to sleep over their lack of empathy. But today, we are going to tear down that comforting lie. The horrifying truth is not that the world is blind to your worth. The truth is that you are the architect of your own invisibility. You have signed a dark, invisible contract, a silent pact, granting everyone around you the absolute right to trample over your soul. The inner multiverse welcomes you to the darkest, yet most liberating corner of your own mind. If this raw truth resonates with the silent screams inside you, hit the subscribe button right now and turn on the notification bell to fuel our journey into these uncharted psychological depths. Do not look away, because what we are about to uncover will shatter your reality and rebuild it from the ashes. The syndrome of the people pleaser, the desperate, clawing hunger to accommodate everyone else, is not a badge of honor. It is not a manifestation of a pure heart or angelic kindness. It is a psychological rot, a suffocating swamp that is slowly pulling you under. I want you to be brutally honest with yourself for just one moment. Recall the countless times you forced a polite chuckle and nodded in agreement while your internal voice was screaming a bloody no. Remember those agonizing, sleepless nights, your chest tight with unacknowledged resentment, choking on the realization that your endless sacrifices are treated like free dirt. You bleed your energy dry, drain your precious time, and shred your self-esteem into confetti just to buy a fragile, pathetic illusion, external validation. You hypnotize yourself into believing this is kindness. You call yourself a peacemaker, telling yourself you are just keeping the harmony. But deep down in the cold places you refuse to look, that kindness has been manipulated and twisted into cowardice. You are no saint. You have actively mutated yourself into a polite ghost, a lingering, formless phantom with no boundaries, no voice, and no spine, bending endlessly to the whims and demands of the external world. What is the true, devastating cost of this endless concession? It is the absolute eradication of your identity. When you systematically refuse to stand up and bare your teeth to protect your own territory, you broadcast a crystal-clear frequency to the universe. I have nothing worth protecting. Your unconditional devotion does not purchase loyalty. It does not buy a single ounce of respect. Instead, it acts as blood in the water. It awakens the predatory instincts of those around you. You become a free, unlimited fueling station for emotional vampires. Those parasitic entities who wander the earth desperately seeking to drain the life force and attention from anyone weak enough to offer their veins. Now comes the slap of reality you desperately need to wake up. Carl Jung, the legendary pioneer of analytical psychology, once issued a terrifying warning. The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. Why is it so paralyzing? Because complete self-acceptance means stripping away the warm, comforting blanket of victimhood. It forces you to stare directly into the abyss and admit that you are not merely a tragic victim of circumstance. You are an active, willing accomplice in your own suffering. The world did not arbitrarily decide to treat you like garbage. It is simply echoing the exact value you placed upon yourself. When you auction off your soul for pennies, the world gladly pays the cheap price. This paradigm shift is going to hurt. It feels like tearing off your own skin, but this agonizing realization is the only key to the prison you built for yourself. To stop playing the eternal victim, requires a monstrous amount of courage. It demands that you strip yourself of the addictive right to point fingers and instead place the crushing weight of your existence squarely on your own shoulders. If their disrespect is something you implicitly permitted, then here is the magnificent, terrifying good news. You possess the absolute sovereign power to revoke that permission right now. Do not wait for someone to magically wake up one day, recognize your hidden value, and crown you with the respect you crave. The universe does not operate on charity and pity. Power, dignity, and respect are never handed down. They are fiercely taken. The journey of healing does not begin with a warm, comforting embrace. It begins with a cold, ruthless, and unforgiving stare into your own cowardice, raising the axe and shattering this pathetic cycle of subjugation once and for all. The genesis of the phantom, unveiling the childhood contract. To shatter this pathetic cycle of subjugation and raise the axe against your own cowardice, we must first descend into the dusty, forgotten archives of your past to understand exactly when you learned to trade your voice for survival. You were not born a polite ghost, floating aimlessly through life with a heart desperate for crumbs of validation. You were born loud, demanding, curious, entirely convinced of your own right to exist. But somewhere along the way, the world taught you a devastating lesson. Your authentic self was inconvenient. Close your eyes and travel back to the genesis of your conditioning. Perhaps it was a volatile household where your anger was punished while your silence was rewarded. Perhaps it was the exhausted sigh of a parent who only seemed to offer affection when you were quiet, agreeable, and useful. Perhaps it was a classroom, a church, a friendship, or an environment where love and acceptance were distributed as rewards for obedience. In those formative years, your developing mind performed a tragic calculation. You concluded that love was conditional, that harmony mattered more than honesty, that safety required self-erasure, that being accepted was more important than being real. You did not become a people pleaser because you were exceptionally generous. You became one because you were terrified of rejection, terrified of abandonment, terrified of losing connection with the very people your survival depended upon. This was the moment the invisible contract was drafted. Without realizing it, you signed your name beneath a devastating agreement. I will abandon myself if it helps me belong. From that moment forward, you became hyper-attuned to the emotional climate around you. You learned to read rooms before entering them. You studied facial expressions, tones of voice, pauses, and sighs. You became a living radar system. If someone needed a caretaker, you volunteered. If someone needed reassurance, you supplied it. If someone needed a scapegoat, you quietly absorbed the blame. You learned to anticipate disappointment before it was even spoken. You became a mirror reflecting exactly what others wanted to see. And the more effective you became at disappearing, the more praise you received. People called you mature, selfless, easygoing, reliable. What they often celebrated was not your authenticity. It was your adaptation. But every adaptation carries a cost. The same survival strategy that protected you as a child now imprisons you as an adult. The armor that once kept you safe has fused to your skin. The coping mechanism that once prevented emotional annihilation is now preventing genuine intimacy, self-respect, and freedom. You carry that frightened child into every room you enter, into every workplace, every friendship, every romantic relationship. You project the faces of old authority figures onto new people. You continue negotiating for safety long after the danger has disappeared. You keep performing, appeasing, accommodating, explaining, overgiving, all because some ancient part of you still believes that authenticity leads to abandonment. The tragedy is that this performance eventually becomes invisible even to yourself. You no longer know where the mask ends and the person begins. You become so skilled at fulfilling the expectations of others that you completely lose contact with your own desires. If someone asked what you truly wanted, not what others needed from you, but what you wanted, you might struggle to answer. Because for years, your attention has been directed outward, toward everyone except yourself. This creates one of the loneliest forms of existence imaginable. You are surrounded by people. You are appreciated, needed, praised, yet something inside remains profoundly unseen. Because they are connected to the role you perform, not necessarily the person hiding behind it. When people praise your selflessness, it often feels strangely hollow, because deep down, you know they are applauding your usefulness, not your truth, and usefulness can always be replaced. This realization is painful, it cuts deeper than most wounds, but it is also the beginning of liberation, because once you understand where the contract originated, you can finally stop obeying it. You are no longer a frightened child navigating a world of giants. You are no longer dependent upon the approval of people who determine your worth. You are no longer required to negotiate for the right to exist. The contract was written in fear, but fear is not destiny. And today, for the very first time, you have the power to tear it apart. The crucible of rebellion, enduring the guilt and the backlash. Recognizing the terrified child pulling the levers of your compliant mind is only the prelude. The true test of your evolution begins the moment you finally force the word no past your trembling lips. Do not be deceived by the superficial empowerment peddled by cheap self-help slogans. Reclaiming your autonomy is not a glamorous victory parade. It is a brutal war fought primarily within your own nervous system. The moment you stop accommodating the unreasonable demands of the world, your mind will revolt against you. The first time you decline a request, the first time you refuse to rescue someone from the consequences of their own choices, the first time you prioritize your exhaustion over another person's convenience, a tidal wave of guilt will crash over you. Your chest will tighten, your stomach will twist, your heart will pound like a warning siren, and an ancient voice buried deep inside your conditioning will begin to scream. You are selfish, you are cruel, you are disappointing people, you are becoming someone bad. But this voice is lying. What you are experiencing is not morality. It is withdrawal. For years, perhaps decades, your nervous system has been chemically conditioned to associate approval with safety. Every smile, every thank you, every moment of being needed, every ounce of validation, it became a drug. And now you are depriving yourself of the substance that kept your survival programming alive. The guilt is not evidence that you are doing something wrong. It is evidence that you are doing something different. You must learn to sit inside that fire. Let the guilt burn. Let it rise. Let it scream. But do not obey it. Do not apologize for existing. Do not negotiate away your boundaries simply because discomfort has appeared. Because while you are fighting the internal war, another battle is beginning outside of you. The moment you stop playing your assigned role, the people who benefited most from your compliance will become deeply uncomfortable. Not everyone, but the ones who depended upon your self-abandonment. The ones who expected unlimited access to your time, energy, attention, and emotional labor. Those individuals will rarely celebrate your growth. Instead, they will resist it. Psychology calls this phenomenon an extinction burst. When a source of reinforcement disappears, the system escalates its behavior in a desperate attempt to restore the old pattern. Expect the guilt trips. Expect the manipulation. Expect the sudden emergencies. Expect the accusations. Expect the emotional performances. Some will become angry. Others will become wounded. Some will portray themselves as victims. Others will accuse you of change. And perhaps the most dangerous sentence of all, you used to be so nice. Listen carefully. What they often mean is, you used to be easier to access. You used to be easier to control. You used to abandon yourself for my comfort. Do not confuse disappointment with injustice. Someone being unhappy about your boundary does not mean your boundary is wrong. It often means the boundary is working. When a parasite complains that you have changed, it simply means you are no longer a viable host. Their outrage is information. It reveals the true foundation of the relationship. Because genuine respect adapts to boundaries, entitlement attacks them. This is the crucible, the furnace where your new identity is forged. If you cave every time someone becomes uncomfortable, you teach them a devastating lesson. Your no is negotiable. Your limits are temporary. Your boundaries are merely suggestions. And your self-respect can still be purchased through guilt. You must not teach that lesson. Hold the line. Even when your hands shake, even when your voice trembles, even when every cell in your body wants to restore the old peace. Because that peace was never peace. It was submission disguised as harmony. The temporary discomfort of disappointing others is infinitely cheaper than the lifelong agony of abandoning yourself. Their anger will pass. Their disappointment will fade. Their opinions will change. But every time you betray your own truth, a piece of your soul learns that it cannot trust you. This is why boundaries are sacred, not because they control others, but because they prove to yourself that your life belongs to you. The discomfort is temporary. The transformation is permanent. And on the other side of this crucible, the polite ghost finally dies. In its place stands someone far more dangerous, a person who no longer requires permission to exist. The architecture of fortress boundaries, forging the weapon of self-respect. Once you survive the initial firestorm of their outrage and the suffocating grip of your own guilt, you finally stand in the clearing. The battlefield is silent. The old identity lies in ruins behind you, and now for the first time, you are ready to build. Boundaries are the architecture of a sovereign life. They are not walls designed to isolate you from humanity. They are gates, heavy iron gates, and you alone decide who earns the privilege of passing through them. For years, you have operated like an abandoned house with shattered windows and unlocked doors. You left your emotional resources unattended. You allowed anyone carrying a need, a crisis, or a demand to walk directly into your sacred space. Then you wondered why everything inside felt violated, why your energy disappeared, why resentment accumulated like mold behind the walls. The answer was never complicated. You had no gatekeeper. You handed unrestricted access to people who had never earned it. That era ends now. The foundation of your fortress begins with a radical shift in perception. Your time is not unlimited. Your emotional bandwidth is not infinite. Your attention is not a public utility. Your presence is not something others are entitled to consume. These are finite resources, sacred resources, and what is sacred must be protected. This protection begins through communication, not emotional speeches, not elaborate explanations, not lengthy defenses. Communication must become precise, clean, unapologetic. For most of your life, every no was immediately followed by a courtroom trial. You felt obligated to provide evidence, witnesses, supporting documentation, a full presentation explaining why your boundary deserved to exist. But every additional explanation secretly communicated the same message. I am asking for permission to protect myself. The fortress requires a different language, a language of certainty. I cannot commit to that. That does not work for me. I am unavailable. I will not accept being spoken to in that manner. And then silence, no defense, no negotiation, no emotional performance. Let the silence stand. Let the discomfort exist. Let them manage their own reaction. Their disappointment is not your emergency. Their frustration is not your responsibility. Their inability to hear no does not create an obligation for you to say yes. The moment you stop explaining yourself excessively, something remarkable happens. You discover who truly respects you. Because healthy people accept boundaries. Entitled people challenge them. The boundary becomes a filter, and that filter reveals everything. This revelation leads to the most painful stage of the process, the shedding. Not everyone will survive your transformation. Some relationships will weaken, others will disappear entirely. Certain people who claim to love you will suddenly become hostile when your compliance expires. Let them go. Do not chase them. Do not bargain with them. Do not dismantle your fortress to keep visitors comfortable. The people most angered by your boundaries are often the people who benefited most from their absence. Their departure is not abandonment. It is purification. You are clearing dead wood from the forest. You are removing parasites from the root system. You are creating space for something healthier to grow. This process requires emotional independence, perhaps the most difficult form of maturity. You must become your own source of validation. You must comfort yourself when others misunderstand you. You must survive being disliked. You must accept that in somebody else's story, you may become the villain, and still continue forward. Because a person addicted to approval will always be vulnerable to manipulation. The moment someone controls your need to be liked, they control your behavior. The fortress breaks that chain. You reach a point where you would rather be respected and misunderstood than loved for a version of yourself that does not exist. You would rather stand alone in truth than be surrounded by people who only applaud your self-abandonment. And then something profound begins to happen. Your energy changes, the desperate frequency disappears, the signal of prey vanishes. You no longer broadcast hunger. You no longer radiate need. You no longer unconsciously invite exploitation. Instead, you project something entirely different: presence, stillness, authority, self-possession, not aggression, not arrogance, not hostility, just certainty. The certainty of someone who knows exactly where their borders begin and end. The certainty of someone who finally understands that peace is worth protecting. This is the great paradox of boundaries. The world fears they will make you isolated. In reality, they make genuine connection possible, because intimacy without boundaries becomes enmeshment. Compassion without boundaries becomes self-destruction. Love without boundaries becomes exploitation. But when strong borders exist, something beautiful emerges. Trust, respect, reciprocity, mutual responsibility. The relationships that survive your fortress are the relationships worthy of entering it. Everyone else was merely passing through. And as the walls rise higher, as the gates become stronger, and as your self-respect solidifies into stone, you finally understand a truth that once seemed impossible. The purpose of boundaries was never to keep people out. The purpose was to ensure that you never abandon yourself again. This is the weapon of self-respect. This is the architecture of sovereignty. And once it is built, the polite ghost can never return. The sovereign rebirth, rising from the ashes of approval. As the weak, the parasitic, and the exploitative fall away, rebounding off the iron walls of your newfound boundaries, you will finally step into the silence and meet the stranger you have been hiding from your entire life, your true self. This is the sovereign rebirth, the spectacular dawn that follows the darkest night of the soul. The heavy, suffocating swamp of the people-pleaser syndrome has been drained, leaving behind solid, fertile ground upon which you can finally stand tall. When you no longer hemorrhage your life force to sustain the fragile egos of everyone around you, something miraculous happens. A massive, terrifying void of energy returns to your core. For the first time, you have the absolute liberty to direct that immense power inward. You will begin to discover what actually brings you joy, uncorrupted by the desperate need to perform for an audience. You will uncover passions, opinions, and a sharp, unapologetic intellect that you previously buried to keep the peace. The smile you wear will no longer be a defensive shield plastered on a corpse. It will be a genuine, rare gift, earned only by those who bring true value to your existence. Do not mistake this sovereign state for a life devoid of love or community. In fact, it is the exact opposite. By destroying the polite ghost, you finally become a solid, tangible entity capable of experiencing authentic love. You can only truly connect with another human being when you have a defined self to connect with. The relationships that survive your transformation and the new ones you forge from this place of power will be built on the unshakable bedrock of mutual respect, not parasitic codependency. You will walk into rooms and no longer frantically scan the faces of others to gauge your own worth. You will bring your worth with you, quietly radiating a gravity that commands attention without uttering a single word. The journey we have taken through the inner multiverse today is not a one-time revelation. It is a lifelong commitment to remaining awake. There will be days when the old ghosts whisper, tempting you to slip back into the warm, familiar numbness of compliance. When that happens, remember the agony of the swamp. Remember the agonizing cost of being invisible. You have stared into the abyss. You have accepted the terrifying responsibility of your own life, and you have survived the crucible. You are the architect of your reality now. Wear your sovereignty like armor. Let your no echo like thunder, and never, under any circumstances, apologize for taking up the space you were born to occupy. The world does not need more polite, broken martyrs. It desperately needs the dangerous, untamable force of a human being who has finally remembered exactly who they are. Finally, conclusion. To kill the people-pleaser within is not an act of cruelty, but the ultimate act of self-preservation. This psychological journey has taken you from the dark, dusty archives of your childhood, where you first traded your authentic voice for the fragile illusion of safety, into the brutal, necessary crucible of rebellion. You have learned that the toxic guilt you feel when saying no is merely a phantom echo of past conditioning, and that the outrage of emotional vampires is the absolute proof of your evolution. By forging the iron architecture of fortress boundaries, You stopped acting as an abandoned house for looters and transformed into a fiercely guarded sanctuary. You ceased over-explaining, justifying, and negotiating your fundamental right to exist. Ultimately, ascending to your sovereign rebirth requires walking through the fire of others' disapproval to reclaim the massive void of energy you previously hemorrhaged on appeasing them. You are no longer a polite ghost navigating a world of giants, but a solid, formidable entity capable of authentic connections built on mutual respect rather than parasitic codependency. Your life is yours to govern. This transformation is not a single isolated event, but a continuous, daily practice of choosing your own peace over someone else's convenience. As you step forward, remember that your boundaries are the visible manifestation of your self-worth. Wear your newfound autonomy like indestructible armor. Let your refusal be absolute and forever banish the instinct to apologize for taking up your rightful space in this world. Profound lesson learned. Genuine connection is impossible without a defined, solid self. If you constantly morph into a mirror to reflect the expectations of others, you are never truly loved. Only the utility you provide is loved. Peace purchased at the cost of your authentic identity is not peace at all. It is a slow, quiet form of self-destruction. How to apply this to your current life? Start by mastering the power of the pause. The next time someone makes a demand of your time or energy, do not answer immediately. Say, "I need to check my schedule and get back to you." This severs the reflexive habit of automatic compliance. When you must decline, utilize neutral, definitive statements such as, "I cannot commit to this," and follow it with unapologetic silence. Do not offer a litany of excuses. Expect the physiological guilt to rise in your chest. Sit still within it without retracting your boundary and observe how it eventually passes. Most importantly, allow people to be disappointed. Relinquish the impossible burden of managing other people's emotional reactions to your self-respect. Question for the community. What is one small boundary you know you need to set this week, but have been hesitating to enforce? Please politely share your situation and perspective in the comments section below so we can all read, relate, and draw strength from each other's experiences. Support the channel. If this journey through the inner multiverse resonated with you and helped you reclaim your power, please subscribe to the channel. Your subscription is the vital support that motivates the creation of more deep, impactful, and life-changing content.